at the project that you're going to be working on towards the mid of this semester. So these are the minimal requirements that that you need to work through. You're going to be working in teams of at most 3. You must have at least 4 distinct web pages. Yeah. So at most 3 of you working together towards this goal. These are I'm going to talk about some very generic requirements, which I hope most of your projects might fall inside of these requirements. If they don't, I'm willing to negotiate some features for some other features, some things that you might be more interested in. We can replace it. This is only to present a level of complexity that is the same for everyone. I think it's fairly generic enough that it should fit most of what you might want to build. Hopefully, it'll work for 80% of everyone here. But there's always a 10 to 20% folks that want to explore something else, and so I'm willing to negotiate with you and see if we can come to an agreement. But let's take a look at this. So these are some very generic requirements. There has to be a landing page, a home page. There has to be a profile page, right? There has to be some way for you to register and log in. All right, so those are fairly generic things that every application should have. Some user management, and also the home page should be aware whether you're logged in or not. If you're not logged in, if I don't know who you are, the content should display anonymous content. When it says, I don't know who you are, I'll just display generic content. But once I know who you are, because you've logged in and you're navigating and you come back to a landing page, it should have information that is specific to you as having been logged in. Okay? Also, the profile page should have 2 versions. There should be a personal version of the profile page that allows me to edit my profile, change my address, phone numbers, emails, and things like that, and only I can see. And then there is a public version of the profile page that anybody should be able to visit, right? And I'll leave to you what that means, what's private and what's not private, right? But there should be 2 versions of this, and it should be aware that it's my profile that I'm looking at, or it's somebody else's profile that I'm looking at. Okay? The one that belongs to me should be mapped to /profile. Whereas a profile that I'm visiting, somebody else's profile, it should be /profile, and then some ID, some identifier of that other person who I'm visiting, somebody else's profile. Notice that this profile, since I'm visiting my own profile, the identity of the person who's currently logged in should not live on the client, right? It should live on the server. Right? So any identifier information, private information, should always live on the server. It should not be displayed here on the client. Only if I'm visiting somebody else's profile, then it's okay to display some unique identifier for that other person. Right? But my person, as I'm logged in, that identity should live on the server, not on the client. So notice that it has no identifying primary key or anything here that uniquely identifies this person. Right? That's resolved on the server. So the server maintains a state, right, and remembers that I am logged in, right, and that identification is on the server. Also, most of the content should be available to everyone, right? Any anonymous user should be able to use most of the application, okay? So there should be something that anybody can do, but obviously there's certain things that only logged in users or identified users can do. So if I'm not logged in, I should still be able to come to the home page. I should be able to navigate, whatever the domain problem that you choose. I should be able to just peruse around, explore. Not until it's absolutely necessary that I log in, then the application should challenge me. Who are you? Right? If I'm gonna like something, if I want to follow somebody, if I want to comment something, I want to write a review, a post, right? I need to know who you are. Okay? So only when absolutely necessary, then the application should challenge me and force me to log in. Also, there has to be some interaction with some third-party API, whether it's your Yumly or or Yelp or Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Are they still in business? Yeah, they are. Okay. Or Best Buy, or some other third-party API, you should be able to You should be able to connect to it, ask a query. It should be able to respond to you with that from that query, and you should be able to display some content based on that interaction with this third-party API. Right? It's your choice, whatever API you want to choose, but it should provide you at least with two use cases. One use case is I should be able to pass it some kind of search criteria, right? And it should be able to respond to me with an array or collection of objects that meet that criteria, right? Whether these are movies, songs, recipes, restaurants, events around me, sports teams, or things that are happening around me, whatever. It's your choice, right? But the API should allow me to provide a criteria, and it comes back with a whole bunch of objects that meet that criteria. Okay? You should provide some way of asking, of querying, maybe some form, maybe a couple of drop downs, input fields, buttons, whatever your choice how you want to search it. Okay? It could be a dedicated page from where you can search, or it could be you could mash together a couple of these pages together if you prefer. I'm displaying it here as a separate dedicated page where you can type in the search criteria, and then it displays a list of summarized results. The summarized results, like it says, the summarized results, it might be maybe a thumbnail, maybe a title, maybe some very short description of what the object is. Should be a summary, right? Should not be a big object, right? You should then be able to navigate somehow, and navigate from here, navigate to some details page where it displays much more information about that particular object that you selected, right? If it's a movie, maybe in the search results, the summarized results, maybe you have the thumbnail of the movie, the title of the movie, the rating, perhaps. If you click on that movie, you would then go back to the server, right, to the third-party API. That's the second use case. Provide detailed information about any one particular object, right? Maybe it's IMDb, and you're querying for a particular movie, right? And it comes back with a heavy object with maybe a whole bunch of pictures and maybe a plot, who the actors are, Rotten Tomato reviews, a whole bunch of things that come back from the third-party API. Yes? Yes? Well, so without asking for password encoding on the server, you should be able to log in just with username and password, or just basic authentication. You're welcome to use like Passport or things like that, where you can interact with Google authentication or Facebook or some social networking authentication, but it's not required. Okay. So the details page goes in and retrieves details information from the remote API. Now, over here, up to this point, I haven't had to log in at all, right? I could be just an anonymous person, and I'm perusing through. I'm looking at recipes or stats for my favorite sports team, right? But not until I want to post something and says, "Ooh, I like that recipe. Let me bookmark it," right? Or I want to thumbs it up, or I want to store it in a favorites or something. Then I need to know who you are, okay? Then it should challenge me, force me to log in or create an account or whatnot, right? And then continue here and be able to interact with the content. Now in this page, both in the search page and the details page, the content might be a mixture of some data that I'm retrieving from the remote server and some data that I might already have stored in my local database, right? For instance, I might go out and go fetch a sports team or a recipe, okay? And I'm displaying the recipe with a whole bunch of pictures and whatnot. That's all from the remote server, from the remote service, yes? But locally, perhaps some other folks in the same community that are using my same web page, right? They might have liked that recipe, right? Or they might have reviewed that recipe, or they might have whatever, right? They might have left some comment about that particular object. Make sense? Right? So half of the content here should be from the remote service, and half of the other content should be from whatever you might have stored in your local database. Make sense? So your database should be able to you should be able to have some kind of identifier that uniquely identifies the object, right, and allows you to retrieve the original object from the remote service and then map it to a local object representation in your local database. Yes?
Is there like a proportion that's required, or can it be like any amount of stuff from the remote service?
From the remote service?
And local service.
From the remote service as much as it gives you, right? From the local server, I'll show you in a minute. Right, so there should be a mixture of both, a merged version. Here as well. So for instance, if I have a summarized list of recipes, right, and I happen to have already interacted with one of them, right, maybe I thumbed it up or I hated it or whatever, right, it should show me the list and show me, oh, this particular one, you didn't like that one, right, or show my thumbs up or star or whatever, right, that I have some summary information about that one particular instance of a summary object. Yes? Okay. So both of them have some merged data from the remote data service and the local database. All right. From here, from the details page, there might be a list of reviews of other folks who might have reviewed this movie or might have reviewed this sports team or whatever, right? And the username who reviewed it should be next to the review. So I should be able to navigate from the review itself that is listed on the details page. I should be able to navigate to the person who reviewed it and see their profile, okay? And see, ooh, all right, and once I'm at their profile, there might be a whole bunch of private details that I can't view, right? Maybe I can't see their address, I can't see their phone number, I can't see their email. But in here, there might be some other public information, right? Perhaps things that other person likes, and maybe other people that this person follows, maybe other reviews that this person has written. Okay? So everything the profile page should be a place where I can find everything that is related to that person. Right? If it's me, right, if it's my profile, in my profile I should be able to see all the movies that I've liked, all the people that I'm following, everybody who's following me, any messages that I've sent to someone or someone sent to me. Maybe not in the profile, but I should be able to navigate to them. Right? So for instance, if I from a comment or from some review here in the details page, I should be able to navigate to Bob's profile, and then I can see all the other movies that Bob likes, right? Or all the recipes that they've bookmarked, all the people that are following Bob. Right? Make sense? All right, so everything that is related to Bob, I should be able to see here. Again, I'll leave it up to you on what exactly that is. Right, but nevertheless, the profile should have lists and links to all the data that is related to that one person. Okay? Let's see, what else? So if it's me, I should be able to see all the links to reviews and movies that I like, and I should be able to click it, right, and go back to the details page of that particular movie that I've liked, that particular sports team that I'm following, right? I should be able to go back to the details page and see the details page about that particular object. Make sense? All right, that's 25 words or less on the flow. Any questions? Right, so a little more details on this. There has to be a home page, and there's several musts here, right? Must be mapped to / or home. Must be the first page when visiting the website. So that's the home page, the landing page, right? Must display generic content. So there's a lot of requirements that are listed explicitly here. These are all minimum, right? Minimum requirements, right? So if you want to go beyond this, by all means. Must display specific content when logged in. Must be clear to what the website is all about, right? If you're Google, you can get away with a search bar and that's saying, don't tell anyone what it is. Everybody knows what you're supposed to do with that search bar. Until you're not Google, make it clear what the website is about, right? What is it that you want me to do, right? So it should be clear what it is that your domain is all about. Your profile page, it should allow you to modify your personal information. It should have a public and a private. I should be able to navigate to all my data that is related to me, or all data that is related to other folks. It should be mapped to /profile and the profile ID. It should group data that is similar, group it together into different sections. The layout I leave to you. The search results page. Another thing. Now the profile page kind of talks about the functionality that I should be able to get to all the information that is related to me. It doesn't have to be just one single page, right? It could be tabs. It could have its own little navigation with different sections that you can navigate. That's up to you, right? But the functionality of being able to navigate to something that is personal to me and then be able to navigate to everything that is related to me should be there, right? But how you lay it out and how many pages you use, that's up to you, right? How do you want to build that? The search page, again, the search page, it could be a dedicated search page, or the search page could be part of the home page, right? Many folks prefer to do that, right? To merge the interaction with whatever domain objects they chose, right? They rather have it as part of the search. As part of the home page. You need to choose an API, a remote API that you can interact with. I would say this is one of the most important requirements, and you should get to it right away. Trying to identify what API, what domain am I going to be using this semester. Some of these you need to apply for. You need to be accepted. You need to become familiar with this API. See if it is useful for those two use cases, right? Being able to retrieve a collection of objects that meet a criteria, right? That I can access a particular object, right? After I know which object I want the details for. So I would start doing this right away of identifying what API I'm going to use. Must provide a summarized list, provide a link or button that I can navigate to a details page. So more or less what I just described. Right, the details page, the login, registration. All right, so the login and registration, for registration, you need to provide at least 2 types of folks that use the application. Okay, these need to be distinct folks that use the application. It could be a seller and a buyer. It could be a faculty and a student. It could be an actor and a fan. Whatever, right? There have to be 2 distinct folks that use your application, right? Each one with a distinct set of use cases, right? So as a faculty, I can create content, I can edit content, I can create quizzes. As a student, I can take quizzes. I cannot edit quizzes. Yes. So the use cases need to be distinct, right? And there have to be distinct UIs that fulfill those distinct use cases. Make sense, right? Some of the use cases might be similar, or they might overlap, right? So they both can edit their profile. They both can do a lot of the things that are common to both, yes? But there has to be a distinct subset of user interfaces that are specific to that user, yes? Okay. So while registering, you should be able to say what role are you creating? Are you logging in? Are you creating a faculty profile? Or are you creating a student profile? Obviously, this is not how it would actually work in the real life, right? There would have to be some user administrator that sets up your role, that says that you are indeed a faculty and all that. That's boring. So we'll just make it easy. Just when you register, you can register as one role or another role. Okay. It's okay for someone to have both roles, right? But when I log in, I have to be able to distinctly choose my role, and then all my use cases are specific to that role. Make sense? It has to be very clear what role you're playing, even if it's the same person. Let's see. Styling requirements. It has to be responsive, right? The TAs are gonna resize your web page, up and down, see if it breaks at any point. Right? Make sure that you verify that your application is responsive at all widths of your browser. Right? Not only on a phone or only on a desktop. make sure that it's continuously responsive all the way through from a big screen all the way down to a phone. Yes? Because as you modify the size of your screen, things start moving around, right? Things starts to wrap, things that don't fit, right? And things appear, disappear, things overlap on top of each other. You got to watch out for those things, right? Make sure that any behavior that you see, things wrapping, things overlapping, make sure that they are intentional. Okay, that it's not happening because of mistake or you didn't catch certain things. Make sure that you test your content with things that are very long, very short, right? That it behaves well in all sorts of use cases. Okay. Also, we're going to look out for consistency, color schemes, things like that. That it has to have good contrast. Don't put things that are very light on top of something that is also very light that you can't read it. Make sure that there's contrast and we can read it. Make sure that you have padding, that you have margins, that things are not flush to one another, that things are aligned. Okay, that the padding between content is always the same. All right, that content that needs to be centered, that it be centered. Don't center everything, right? Certain things need to be left justified. Certain things need to be right justified, right? Certain things might look well centered. So make sure that things are justified correctly. So so there's some styling requirements. Make sure that scroll bars appear only when needed, right? That you don't you show up a vertical, a horizontal scroll bar when you don't need it. Right, that only the things that need scroll bars appear and disappear when needed. Avoid embedded scroll bars. CSS libraries. So the only CSS library that you can use are libraries such as Bootstrap, right? Or there's a couple more materials design. Some of these libraries that are for developers. Right, these are not for designers. Designers have some of these libraries that you can drop and then it automatically just looks spectacular, right? So those are not allowed, right? You need to use the developer libraries such as Material Design, Bootstrap, some of these that are basically, you have to apply all the styles and all the CSS whatnot to create an application, right? We're not building websites here. We're building applications. Yes. Oh, of course. Yes, definitely. White spaces. Make sure you make good use of white space. Depending on your type of user, depending on what type of user you might have lots of white spaces or very little white space. Right? If you're a system administrator, you're okay with bombarding a super user with lots and lots of data. All right. But if you are a casual user, then perhaps you might want to break it up into multiple wizards and pages and whatnot, so you don't overload the end user, right? So make good use of white space and where appropriate. Contrast, labels, everything should be labeled. There should also be some tooltips, placeholders that gonna give me a hint on what is it you want me to type at an input field. So placeholders. Everything should be well labeled. Look and feel. The application must look professional, right? Something that you are proud that I can boast and show my colleagues. Is look what we're doing in my class, and even though it's subjective, a great website when you look at it, when you see it, right? It's obvious. Consistency, user experience requirements. So if you're navigating between pages that are somewhat related to one another, it should be very clearly marked, how to navigate into a child page and then how to navigate away from back to the parent page. So it should be clearly marked how to navigate in and out of different pages. The current logged in user should be clearly marked, perhaps with a symbol on the right hand side. The clicks and the buttons, right, should be easily clickable in a small screen, right? That takes up maybe perhaps the entire width of the phone, right? So that it makes so I don't have to go and peck at it, right? Also, if you have checkboxes and radio buttons, right, you should use labels correctly so that it expands the width of the entire checkbox. So I don't have to again have to peck at it. Make the areas as big as possible to click them on, especially on a small screen. Architectural requirements, no global variables, no global functions. So you should use good practice of modularizing things, creating namespaces, packages, modules, things like that. The content should be it's single. It needs to be a single page application, right? So you're going to load your page only once, right? And then you're going to dynamically render the content as the person navigates from one section to another section. Use good practice such as using components, controllers, events, the model view controller design pattern. Avoid maintaining state on the client side. As much as you can, try to maintain state on the server side. This means that one particular feature is that, especially in dynamic content, oftentimes the content, you've gone out to the server, you retrieve the content, and then you dynamically render the content on the page. Yes, oftentimes that state of the data that came back from the server lives only in the browser, right, for that moment. Yes, as you render the page. Typically, if I click refresh, all that information is going to be gone, right, and the page would render blank again. Yes, since there's no way for it to remember anything from the previous second ago. Yes, well. Your architecture should be robust enough that it can survive a refresh, right? If you refresh the page, the URL should have enough information, right, so that if I do refresh, it could read the state of the application from the URL, right, and say, you were looking for the Batman movie, right? Let me go fetch that again, right, so I can re-render the page, right? Most websites do this. Right, if I copy and paste a URL from Amazon and I email it to you, right, and you click on that link, ideally you would see exactly what I'm seeing, even though the content is completely dynamic, right? So there's enough information in the URL, right, that the application can say, okay, I need to go fetch this, that, and the other, and re-render the entire page the way it was originally. Make sense? Yes. I'm sorry. Say again. If it's just a URL that you have, yes, it is. Especially if you're not on the same machine. If you're in the same machine, you could store it in local storage and read from there. But if you email it, then there's nowhere there, right? The URL would be used to go hit the same server and the same database, right, to go fetch the state and then re-render the page. Yeah. So typically this is referred to as a URL encoding or state URL encoding, right? That would be enough for the application to reconstitute itself. Also, all data that the client is accessing should be accessible through web service clients, which we'll talk about that maybe tomorrow. So anytime that the client needs to go fetch data, there should be a dedicated set of JavaScript files, usually referred to as web service clients, that go out and fetch all this, right? All the data access. So we'll talk about that. Follow the file structure that we're going to be showing you throughout the semester, right? Unless if you've taken a co-op and you feel very strongly about a particular structure of structuring your project, then follow that, right? Or negotiate with me. If you haven't, then follow the file structure that I'm going to be suggesting here in class. What else? User requirements. So two user requirements. Two roles. Two human roles. Right? There could be a seller and a buyer, a developer, a quality assurance, a project manager, a restaurant, a cook, a waiter, a delivery boy, a player, a coach, a fisherman, a partner, a student, a faculty. Right? So each one of whatever domain you choose, you have to have at least two human users, two human actors that can use your application. Yes. Doesn't include an admin user, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. And there's also the anonymous user. Right? The anonymous user meaning you don't know who I am. You still have to provide something. You need to let me do something. Okay. anonymous user requirements. So yeah, so I should be able to do something while not logged in. End user requirements. So as a user, as an end user, as opposed to an admin, right? An end user meaning me using the application from the outside. I should be able to do some CRUD operations. CRUD meaning create, read, update, and delete. Yes. Now, depending on my role, I might have some CRUD operations, and you, in your role, you'll have some other CRUD operations. Yes. Now, we might overlap on some of the objects that we're manipulating, right? Where you might have read-write operations, but I only have read operations, right? Like a quiz. If you're a faculty, you can read, write up a quiz, questions, and whatnot. But as a student, I only have read operations, right? I can only look at the quiz, yes? Or as a faculty, I can create content, I can create modules, widgets, and whatnot. But as a student, I can only consume that content. Make sense? Right? So sometimes the CRUD operations don't overlap. Right? So perhaps some of the operations are applicable only from one role, and some of the half of the other operations are applicable to some other role. Yes? Right? But nevertheless, even though I don't have write operations on the quiz, right, that I can't change the quiz, I do have write operations on my answers to that quiz. Make sense? So both roles should have CRUD operations, but not necessarily in the same object. Make sense? Right. So all users should have some mechanisms of creating, reading, updating, or deleting some data. Right. It's up to you what data you want the user to be able to read, write, update, and delete. Yes? And sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't on a particular object. But every type of user should have a CRUD operation. Web service requirements. So you will be using either Node.js or Java, and you will have to use to create a middle tier application. And with this middle tier application, you create all sorts of RESTful web services to access data. Database, you can choose either Mongo or MySQL. It doesn't matter. You will need to use some kind of mapping or library to talk to a database. For Java, we suggest you use JPA. For Mongo, we suggest you use Mongoose. But you're free to choose some other library if you prefer. Right? But we're going to be covering these two libraries here in this class. But if you're familiar with other things, then go ahead. We're going to be focusing on MySQL, but if you prefer to use some other database, other relational database, feel free to use that other relational database. But here we're going to be covering MySQL. Data model requirements. All right, so for data model requirements, so every operation, every type of object, whether it's a movie, a song, a recipe, a team, whatever it is, right? You're going to need some of these operations on any one of those objects, right? For instance, you might need to create you might need to insert a song, right? You might need to be able to retrieve a particular movie from the database. You might need to retrieve all the recipes that are stored in the database, right? You might need to pass in some predicate, and retrieve only those employees that have a particular range in salary or in a particular department or whatnot. So read with a predicate. You'll need to update, update my review or update a particular post, or you might need to delete something, right? So for any one object that you're working with, you'll need to implement these 5 or 6 CRUD operations. Okay, whatever domain it is that you choose. You'll need to have at least 2 domain objects. At least 2 domain objects. Domain objects is you choose a domain. As a domain, I mean your domain might be movies. Your domain might be sports. Your domain might be restaurants. Your domains might be events. Each one of those domains, right, has a particular set of domain objects, right? If it's the movie domain, then you might have actors. Well, no, that's a person. Non-human domains. I'm sorry, non-human domains. You might have playlists, right? You might have movies. You might have reviews, right? You might have all those are domain objects that are specific to your domain that you chose. Make sense? right? If you have songs, you might have playlists, right? You might have the actual songs, right? The song is a domain object, right? You need at least two, at least two domain objects. So for instance, examples might be domain objects would be movies, the schema. So if it's the movies object, for instance, rating, directors, actors, right? So it gives you some examples. So two domain objects, two user models, right? Maybe one faculty, one student. At least one one-to-many relationship, right? A one-to-many relationship is one object relating to many other objects, right? So for instance, a playlist is related to many songs, right? One playlist, many songs. Yes? That's a one-to-many relationship, okay? So at least one relationship, one-to-many relationship, right? At least one many-to-many relationship, okay? For instance, an actor acts in many movies, and one movie has many actors. Yes, right. That's a many-to-many relationship between two objects. Right. So at least one. Also, embedded schema. If you're using Node.js, if you're using a non-relational database, right? We'll talk about what an embedded schema is, but Node.js, MongoDB prefers storing its data as objects within objects within objects, so embedded, right? As opposed to in relational database, the common thing is to split it up into multiple tables, right? And then each table then references each other using foreign keys and primary keys. Yes, but in non-relational database, the preferred way to store things is to embed things one inside of another, right? And we'll talk about how to do that. But if you are using a non-relational database, use ample use of embedded schemas. So here are some examples on what. Here's a very, very, very generic UML class diagram that kind of captures all these relationships. Here's a user. Here's a user related to many users. Right. Here's one user that is related to a whole bunch of users. Right. So this is a user-to-user association where one user maybe is following another user. Okay. And a user is being followed by many users. Right, so that's a many-to-many within users. Here's a one-to-many of one user to many users in the same table. This might be like maybe a manager that is managing many other users, where the manager themselves are a user. Right, so a user managing many users. Here's an inheritance relationship of a base class for a user, and then you might have faculty, students, right, that inherit from a base user class. Who has taken databases? 5200 at least? Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. We'll come back to some of the database and data modeling and whatnot, and we'll review that when we talk about databases. Also, here's a many-to-many relationship between a user and a domain object. Right, here's an aggregation. Composition and aggregation. So there's a one-to-many relationship between a user and a domain object, and then relationships of domain objects with themselves, all right, or a nested association between domain objects and themselves. Right. Again, this is very generic. Right? You wouldn't actually implement all of these relationships. All right. It's just capturing all of them all in one place. These are just examples on particular domains. Oh wait a minute. Okay, here's some examples. Oh, that's small. Do I have it here? Oh, I don't have it. Can you see that? You have a person, a buyer, and a seller who are inheriting from a person. They can send messages to each other. A buyer and a seller can exchange messages. A buyer can follow another buyer. A buyer can review many products. A product can be reviewed by many buyers. A seller can have many stores, and a store can have many products. Okay, and products can be organized into hierarchies, into categories, right? A category, subcategory, subcategory, and the actual product. So here's an example of a store. Here's another example. where you have a faculty and a student, right, that are inheriting from a person. They both can send messages. A faculty can teach many sections, and they can author many courses. And the course has many sections, and the student can be enrolled in many sections, right? And the faculty can teach many. So here's a many-to-many. That's another many-to-many, right? Here's another many-to-many, right? Here's a one-to-many, right? From course having many sections. So just examples on some UML class diagrams. External web API, as I mentioned, right? That's a major requirement. Whether it's the Weather Channel, Yahoo, Yumly, IMDb, YouTube, they all have very good APIs that you can use to retrieve data from. Okay, I think that's it. Any questions?